Questions like, why are we here? What happens when you die? Where did we come from? And is there a God?
The U.S. government has been shown to have had a long-term interest in Scientology.
This is a practical question here.
I know this is an illusion, or dream, or call it the way you want to call, you know?
We are a bigger threat to the people who are secretly trying to control this planet than any other group on this planet.
But the problem with an atheist is he believes that his belief is based on fact.
Oh, it's wireless. Yeah, you got wireless one.
He's impressive. He's a powerful guy.
I can't make this shit up.
The leaders of this are not just after our church, they're after the whole of this planet.
He was put here to work out his own salvation. And we feel in Scientology that we've made a very big stride in that direction.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and isn't it lovely to be here listening to the good old Straussy Wousy? This is the podcast that has everything to do with the interesting world of Scientology. Yes, that odd religion you might have heard about. If you don't know what Scientology is, then I'll tell you. It's a bunch of self-help books and exercises that evolved into a religion created by American sci-fi author L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s. Today's guest interview is with Matty Rose. How did you like the last show with Mary Freeman? According to the viewer statistics, it was a success. Now it is time for us to go down that rabbit hole into the interesting world of Scientology, where up is down and down is up, where left is right and right is left, where what you thought was impossible is possible. Welcome to the show on this 27th day of February 2019. Hello, welcome. And something is on my mind, and it's because I was talking to someone and we're discussing like people and I guess the reasons for things, and like it was like the reason for love or something like that, and it was all very sort of logical, like, oh, it has this purpose or evolutionary purpose or this purpose or that. Like, it was very purposeful. And I realized that what happens is that, so we're gods, we're thetans that are trapped into bodies, right? And we can get trapped into thinking that there is no Satan there, that there is no God there. Because what happens is we get in this predictable way of behaving with, it probably starts off with habits, then it turns into routines, and then the person next minute is acting like a robot. Like if you look at the average person, right, and you say that's a god, you'd say, no, it's not. I mean, you could probably argue it's more a robot because the way how it goes about its business being so robotic, doing the same thing. You could actually invent a robot now, like get the best robot in the world and put programs into it, and then it could act like this average wog. The average wog life. See what I mean? So it seems like that's what's happened to us. That's what happened to Satan's. It probably starts off with routines and habits, and then all the implants come in and stuff. And then you've got a God that's acting like a robot. And so then you get the philosophical people like me and this other person who I was talking to today. And we're looking at the person's behavior, trying to understand it. And you can start thinking that there is no God there, that there is no Satan there, because you're like, no, this is just a piece of meat because of the way it's behaving. It's acting like a robot. And we're talking about stuff that I do, and it was throwing my friend off who I was talking to because I don't act robotic and predictable, and I don't act like a program. Like, you can't make a robot and then program it and then have it behave like me, right? Because I'm more in touch with my godlike being. I'm more of a Satan than other people, right? So what I noticed about the difference between gods and robots, messed bodies, beings that have become trapped in a messed body and don't act like gods, the difference is the predictability. One acts like a robot, the other doesn't act like a robot. And so if somebody, and I noticed with this person I was talking to, because I can tell he had these theories, and when we're looking into people's behavior and stuff, and then we're talking about stuff that I do, it was throwing his theories out of whack, because it was like, whoa, hold on a second. Then love isn't a biological function that evolved because of blah, 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 blah. And it, like, I'm basically a troll. And Satans are trolls because they're not these predictable robots. But it's just interesting. It's just, this is how you can get gods acting like robots, is it these routines and these habits, and then they act predictable ways. And then you look at a WOG and you can say, yeah, that person's just a robot that's just been programmed and there is no God there. It's understandable how someone could think that there's no God there. I agree. But then you get someone like me who comes along and does things, and it's like, whoa, it throws off their theories, because they're like, hold on a second, what the hell? What's this? That's odd behavior. That's what is this, and why is he doing that? And anyway, I've just noticed it for a while. I noticed it most with when I'm around people who are good at maths, because maths think in these like formula type ways and these predictable ways, and they view other people like that, like these little predictable beings, and they try and predict their behavior, and it's almost like they have, like, you learn the formula of how to work out the area of a circle. They look at people and they do the same thing, and they go, oh, this person's predictable because of blah blah blah, and they get their universe like that. But then in comes someone like me, and it can really fuck them up, because I notice when I've been around them, it throws off all their predictions, because they're like, whoa, hold on a second, why is he doing this? And I thought he was doing that because what? Why did he say that? Like it throws off their ability to work out what's going on. Right? I should come up with an example, but I can't be bothered of how I'm unpredictable. But it just shows how I'm a god, because gods, that's the thing about gods, they are unpredictable. They're creator beings. They're not like these programs. Whereas programs, robots, and all that sort of stuff, that's all predictable. You can work out mathematical formulas for it. But you can't work out mathematical formulas for us, who we really are, and if we really show who we really are. So that's the difference between a Satan actually being a Satan and then a Satan that's been trapped. Because a Satan that's been trapped acts robotically and is predictable. You know, a Satan that's free is not predictable. Anyway, I just thought I'll mention that. But I'll quickly read out the little quote I wrote. And I just said, gods can get into habits Habits turn into robotic routines, and next minute a god appears to be a best robot that isn't animated by a spirit. Gods are not programs, they are not predictable, and I'm getting more like this. I don't know, it's just funny. It's good being around these sort of people and just throwing them off, because you're really waking them up to the truth about life. It's like, hey, the truth is that, you know, it's just the things we aren't just programmed robots. We're these amazing creator beings. Anyway, here's a success story, an independent Scientology success story, and it's from 2004. From 2017, so it's a bit out of date. And it's for OT48, which is interesting. I assume it must be from the Ronzol Bridge. So here it is. I thought I would be so excited that I would not even be able to think. Actually, it is quite the opposite. I'm simpler than ever. Really, a simple Thetan. Deeply calm, happy, extremely stable, knowing all our experiences and willing to help others to reach the level where too few of us are. Sorry, I want to read that again because this is OT48, so I'm just interested in what has gone on at OT48, you know. It's the area of the bridge where you don't hear much about. Deeply calm, happy, extremely stable, knowing all our experiences and willing to help others to reach the level where too few of us are. If my head can be in the clouds, my feet are well grounded, and I realize the task ahead of us, and I will continue to take my share as much as I can to help and make things possible for others to reach the spiritual freedom. Thank you so much, LRH, CBR, Erica Max, and the whole team in Ronzorg to be here for us without any failure. Thanks to you and your perseverance and persistence. Earth will become a sane planet where it will be great to live on and to expand. We can all help at whatever level we are. Every bit counts. With plenty of theta, Henrietta. Interesting. Okay, post of the week. This is from Jonathan Burke. It's from a while ago. Usually these posts of the weeks and these comments of the weeks aren't up to date because I guess I haven't been regularly making podcasts every week, so I have a backlog. This says, Julianne Koepke, age 17, was sucked out of an airplane in 1971 after it was struck by a bolt of lightning. She fell 2 miles to the ground, strapped to her seat, and survived. She had to endure a 10-day walk through the Amazon jungle before being rescued by a logging team. I believe that because I've heard of other stories of people surviving out of falling out of planes. That's pretty out there. See, nothing is impossible. It just isn't possible. I guess that's like, you know, you have these predictable things. You say you fall out of a plane, you're going to die. Then out comes this thing, and then it's just a total left field ball or whatever you call it. And it's just like, what the hell is this? A hook ball or something. And it's like, whoa, and this thing comes in and says you survive if you fall out of an airplane. I mean, that throws off the predictability, you know. And that's probably because she's a Thetan. Like, as in some sort of spiritual thing maybe saved her or something, you know. It wasn't just... no, she probably... If that was just like... maybe someone who isn't as spiritually powerful or whatever, she could have just died, you know. Maybe there's more going on, you know. Anyway, it's now time for a Scientology joke. A Scientologist took a second job in a restaurant to earn some extra cash for the holidays. All went well until the boss said, "Please fill the salt shakers." It took the Scientologist 3 hours to put the salt through the hole in the bottom of the container. Wow. I don't even know if I get that. But I don't know much about salt shakers. A Scientologist took a second job in a restaurant to earn some extra cash for the holidays. All went well until the boss said, "Please fill the salt shakers." It took the Scientologist 3 hours to put the salt through the hole in the top of the container. Oh, okay, the top, sorry. Just need to get, okay. Wow. Yeah, partly sometimes I feel like I don't understand them because they're just really not funny. That's part of the problem with these Scientology jokes. Anyway, guess what? It's now time for today's guest interview with Matty Rose. He is a YouTuber. He's a bit of a right-wing guy, and he has political information. He has very little experience in Scientology. He used to work for some church members in Melbourne years ago. I did want to talk a bit more about that. It was some sort of admin tech business, but he didn't want to talk about it. So we only spoke a little bit about Scientology, and the rest was actually about politics. But I think it's important because we need to talk a bit about politics. We need to understand what's going on in the world and what left-wing and right-wing are. And I noticed that there's just left-wing agendas going on, like the gender thing. I mean, they're trying to turn people into a genderless being, and they're chopping little kids' dicks off and they're giving them drugs. I mean, it's too far, the left-wing agenda and stuff and this equality stuff. It's just, the perversions are just wild and they're just too far. I think things were at an okay level in the 90s. I mean, gay people had rights, you know. I mean, they weren't picked on or anything. They were fine in the 90s, you know. Transgenders were still sort of, you know, treated all right. I mean, it's not like we live in this barbaric society or anything, but the left kept on pushing and they kept on trying to make out that racism is going on and that transphobia is going on, and they kept on pushing the environment thing, because even in the 90s it was like there was talk about global warming, but it just wasn't as crazy. It was like, yeah, there was propaganda in schools, but it just got so ramped up these days. I just think I had to do a podcast with someone to talk about these sorts of things, because I think it's good to sometimes not be in the Scientology bubble, because you're so attuned by that world that you forget what's going on outside the world, and you need that datum of comparable magnitude of, you know what I mean, to understand what's going on. Like, it's not only a Scientologist sort of closed-minded when it comes to other practices, which they shouldn't be, and I think they're misinterpreting KSW. Obviously, you know, you do TR0, you do TR0. You know, you deliver student hack course, you deliver student hack course. But there's nothing wrong with you in your free time doing the funkiest TR0 you ever want. I mean, it's not even called TR0, but you can do whatever you want in your free time. You know? L. Ron Hubbard he wrote KSW because he didn't want orgs doing things wrong. He wanted orgs to deliver the courses, because that's what Scientology is. Otherwise, it would just be this moldable thing, and in 1,000 years' time, it will become like Christianity, where it doesn't even really spiritually advance you. But it doesn't mean in your free time you can't do the funkiest things that you feel you want to do and you want to experiment with and stuff. Like, I mean, I bought these glasses that are like meditation assist glasses, and well, I don't know if you call them, I guess you call them meditation assist, but you put them on your head and they're like sunglasses, but they flash light, right? And you have your eyes closed and the light flashes and it basically, while you're lying there, and I listen to like meditation music and hold crystals in my hands and stuff, but it all just keys me out, gives me spiritual advancement and stuff. But the light particularly flashes and it wakes up your pineal gland or something, or it activates something in your brain, and it makes you feel good. Like, seriously. You do it for like half an hour a day, and in general, you act less keyed out, and you're more spontaneous and happy and buzzy and stuff, and you're keyed out. And I think it's because it releases some hormones in your brain that our pineal are supposed to actually be releasing a lot all the time, but they haven't been for whatever reason. And without this chemical getting released by the pineal, you just get keyed in easier and stuff. That's just my theories on it. And Aaron Hubbard talks about some implant developed that he says knocks out the pineal. And I think it was the FAC1 or something, but knocks out the pineal, right? So some aliens came up with some implant to intentionally knock out the pineal because they didn't want people having the pineal, because it probably helps people and makes them more spiritual and makes them keyed out. They don't want that. They want your pineal not activating. That's why they put fluoride in the water supply, because it shuts down your pineal activation, and the godlike being inside the messed body acts more like a robot and just is a slave, and that's what they want. Anyway, so using these glasses every day, you're flashing the pineal. I guess it's kind of like pumping the weight, except you're pumping that muscle in your brain or whatever. You're pumping the weight every day, bit by bit, and wakes the pineal gland up more and more and more, and it gets it activating. Then you've got this pineal gland that activates normally all the time. So you're happy, you're cool, you're keyed out, and it's the way you're actually supposed to be naturally. And you're a bit spiritual, and you have more intuition and stuff, because that's all the things that come with the pineal gland. And so, I mean, I'll let you know after I've been doing it for like a month, but the reason I knew it worked is because I tried it once, and I tried it with someone else who wasn't spiritual at all, and the next day we were sitting there, and I was like, "Hey, do you feel good?" And he's like, "Yeah, I feel good." And I'm like, "Yeah, I feel good as well." And he actually also said he's also, I think he said something like alcohol, like he's a bit of an alcoholic, and he said, yeah, I don't even feel like having a drink. You see what I mean? He's not keyed in. That's why people drink, because they're keyed in, because of their anxiety. Why they got anxiety? Because their pineal gland isn't activating. Yeah, engrams affect these sorts of things, but there's also other things that affect these sorts of things, and it's obviously the pineal. So anyway, we had done this thingo, and the next day we were feeling keyed out, because obviously we got our pineal gland activating, and it was releasing the right hormones, and our brain was actually working comfortably, and we just feel comfortable. And I noticed at that time, like, we're just sitting there, I think watching TV, but you just feel sort of good just to be there, right? You don't feel like keyed in and anxiety and uncomfortable. And then another time I tried it, and this is before I bought the glasses, and the next day I was just happy. And I remember I was doing something that was stressful, right? It involved stress. It was like public speaking, and it was something stressful. And I was just like, yeah, I feel good. Like, it was just interesting. I was just like, yeah, this hangover effect. Anyway, so I was just like, you use this every day. I buy the glasses now. I'm going to be planning on using it every day. And it's like, wow, it's going to be interesting what happened. I mean, I'm just going to be totally activated pineal gland all the time, functioning properly. And it should be really good. I'm already starting to feel more confident and just less keyed in. Anyway, these are the sorts of things that people need to know, because I know there are people out there who are drinking alcohol to key themselves out, and it's just so stupid, because it's just like, you need to get healthy, you need to take the right supplements, you need to do the right meditations and use these glasses and stuff and get your pineal gland activating and get healthy, and then You don't need any alcohol and stuff like that. And maybe after I've activated the pineal gland for a bit, maybe it'll wake it up and I won't have to do the meditation for 40 minutes or whatever. You know, it'll just stay activated, you know. Anyway, I'm sure everyone Hubbard has no problems with me messing around with these flashy light glasses and waking up my pineal gland, you know. Now, if I'm doing that while I'm doing my grades or something, that's a bit weird because you're going to confuse things. You're doing two things at one time. You're sort of mixing something. You won't know what process caused what reaction. Or makes CSing harder. But outside of that, I mean, there's no problems with using the flashy light glasses. You know what I mean? I mean, these are inventions. These are the things that L. Ron Hubbard wanted to have. A new civilization that has these new technology, you know. It's not being a squirrel. You can, you know, it's just, you know, but if somebody pulls out the flashy light glasses and says, hey, let's add this to the concourse, that's a whole other story. The concourse is the concourse. It's not concourse add new fancy technology glasses. Yes, I do agree. If someone does TR0 and they put these glasses on, they're more likely to have a major stable win. I mean, I reckon it's possible, yeah, and you could get them more comfortable sitting there, okay? But no. You're changing it. You know, it's not TR0. TR0 is TR0 in its own individual thing. It's about being there, blah, blah, blah. It's not activating your pineal gland. It's another thing. Anyway, so I think I was saying how people are not open to other practices. Scientologists, they're also not open to other things. Because Scientology is all-consuming and there's so much to it and it's so interesting and so cool and it's like addictive that you can sometimes forget about these other things. And so this guy, this Matty Rose guy and his YouTube channel and stuff, it's different stuff, it's interesting information, it's other stuff. It's like basically Sire's being like, I don't listen to Alex Jones or something like that because it's like they're in the Scientology bubble. Do you see what I mean? It's just Scientology that they do. But you need to have these other viewpoints. You need to go outside the bubble and learn things as well. And so I'm not some SP, I'm not some 1-1 that's trying to stop people from doing Scientology. I am trying to stop people from being a one-eyed Scientologist, someone who's stuck in the bubble. And so interviewing this guy, it's just a bit different because we really don't talk much about Scientology at all, but I think it's necessary. And I don't do interviews on this podcast that have nothing to do with Scientology often. I mean, it barely ever happens, but it seemed to happen in this situation. Now, also saying that, we also go into some hardcore deep information, some real truth things that are ugly. And this interview is going to offend people, by the way. And it's not good PR. But I'm going to show it anyway. It kind of went down an area that I didn't quite know I wanted to go into, but there are hardcore truths going on in this earth, and there are things that I do and that I believe and that I know that I actually can't even tell you. Like, I try and be as honest as I can with this stuff, but there is a point where I say, no, I have to draw a line here, and I can't say this because it'd just be too bad a PR, you know? Like, how can I give you an example? Like, I told you how I've been using cannabis oil, right? Now, that's bad PR because people don't understand cannabis oil. It doesn't have THC in it. I've been using it for like a week now. So far, I've had benefit from it. I don't think it's getting me high or anything. I feel it's just like a supplement. It seems to be that. The word cannabis is like an umbrella term. It's not marijuana. They're separate things. It's like a separate part of the plant or a separate plant or something. But I'm not a pot smoking, I'm anti-pot and stuff, okay? But I have tried cannabis oil. But see how that's bad PR? And for me to say I'm pro-cannabis oil, like it can be, I don't know, it's just bad PR. Well, in this interview, we talk about things and ideas and stuff that I know is fact that is real extreme versions of that. That's really going to shake those people who are listening to this, particularly if you have a strong button on races and stuff. You know, I mean, that's why it's like it's ugly and stuff, and that's why it's like, well, it goes really. Actually, it's kind of cool that I interviewed this guy because it got onto topics that were really heated, that make it more interesting. Because we weren't going to be talking about Scientology, so that made it fairly cool. But you have to understand that the truth is ugly, and it's really out there. It's really not what you think. It's really whoa. It's really head twisting and whoa, because everything is lied, and there's lies, and there's so many lies out there and stuff. So when someone comes along and just says the truth, I mean, they appear crazy, or they appear like an evil racist, or they just like it's so wild, the truth. All right, but you have to go down that path of truthfulness. Basically, it's not awakening and finding out the truth isn't pretty. And you're going to go down ugly paths and stuff, but it's just part of going on that journey. And if you don't want to awaken, that's fine. Then stop doing Scientology, stop doing anything, and just go and play with balls or something, you know. But if you're going to go on that path of finding out the truth, you're going to go on a wild adventure, and there are ugly things on that adventure, and there are some things that will scare you, you know, and it's hard to confront, and you've got to confront it. And this interview is one of those things. So anyway, here it is. Let's dig into this, chuck on a pot of tea, and let's hear some talk about the world's most interesting and controversial religion, Scientology.
After all, we haven't been invited, and curiosity often leads to trouble. Goodbye, Dinah. Goodbye.
Matty Rose is an intelligent right-wing YouTuber. He is not a Scientologist, but used to work for some church members years ago. His videos are exposing the truth about modern politics, which I'll ask him all about, and that we all need a basic understanding of. Matty Rose, are you there?
I am here, and I'm sure you can see me through my camera.
Yep. Yeah, I can see you.
Fantastic.
How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. On a Saturday night, just ready for a chill discussion about certain things.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the Scientologist you worked for years ago. But how about you explain a bit your YouTube channel? Because I think it's just important information. Because I think in general people, I mean, because you're not taught about it in school, and the media just bullshit to you. So people's understanding of politics is a bit screwed up. I mean, I don't even think people know what right-wing or left-wing even mean, or what communism mean and stuff.
So my channel is hard to explain, I guess. It's kind of an expression of my own personality, which just so happens to enjoy talking about politics and current events and exposing media propaganda and lies especially, and media bias. You also know I've got a series on economics, a series on ideas and arguments, which I call it, where I do things like the truth about the White Australia policy, the truth about African gangs. I did a video on the Tower of Babel and the European Union as well, and it's quite a varied channel. There's response videos to like articles and videos, and I have my own little characters and stuff as well for some videos. Those ones take a little bit longer, so I probably don't make as many of them. Well, I made quite a few of them actually, but I'll probably be making more of the other content going forward, just because it's a lot quicker to make. In terms of left and right and what they mean, I mean, the terms have been so jumbled and mumbled over the years that it's hard to get a correct definition. So what I find it a lot easier to do is to call people who are leftists, because what that is, and then like anyone else is a non-leftist, I should say. So you got leftists who are essentially communists, socialists, people who are infected with the brain virus the Marxist globalist mechanical brain virus.
Do you know what's funny? Like, it sounds extreme what you're saying, but I literally believe it is like a brain virus. I think it's like a mental illness. I think it's like saying 2 + 2 = 5. Like, I reckon they're really messed up. And
yeah,
like, because I know it might seem like I exaggerate things, like when I talk about lefties and stuff. But it's just like when you identify something and you know it is evil, and it's trying to like dance around in this pretty looking way and say we want equality and we're nice, and they try and talk like they don't show their real self. They be fake. Like, then that's when it's just like, nah, we need to expose these crazy people.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it a brain virus. You could call it satanic as well. They are actually Lucifer worshippers. I think there are reports that a lot of the people at the very top do genuinely worship the devil.
Like the Rothschilds and stuff, the top bankers.
I mean, there's people like that.
And George
not
Soros.
Just them. There's all these conspiracy theories or stories, more so rather than conspiracy theories, but stories of some pretty dark rituals. And the film Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick. He had a heart attack soon after he made that.
Yeah.
There's the idea that he was actually killed by the globalists because he was exposing what they were actually doing and how evil they really were.
Yeah.
There's also
another
thing.
They cut time out of that movie. Apparently, they edited it, which is a shame because I'd love to have known what was in the stuff they cut out. But apparently, it could have been some pedophilia references because those elite Satanists and stuff. That's what they get into.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. But who knows? We'll never actually know. Another explanation, which is a really interesting one, is a Gnostic explanation, which says that it's actually archons. So archons are the grey aliens. The grey aliens that, I got abducted by aliens and they got the big eyes and all that kind of thing. They're actually interdimensional beings who live in the void of space as a hive mind with a reptilian overlord who controls them all telepathically. So archons can't actually survive in our world and in our atmosphere for very long. So they take people up and they'll abduct them and study them and then bring them back. But what they can do is infect people with their mind. So they implant ideas into people's minds. And archons live in the void of space, which is very mechanical. You got the planets go around the sun goes around the center of the galaxy, et cetera, et cetera. So their domain is the mechanical cold void of space. And what they want to do is infect human beings with the mechanical brain virus. And that's
the
actually
hive mind
explanation. That explanation is actually 2,000 years old. So I've heard, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Is that from the Gnostics?
That's the Gnostic explanation. That's hearsay. That's me reporting someone who reported it. So I haven't read the primary text.
Okay.
So that could be incorrect, but it is what I've heard. It's the Gnostic explanation for a number of things. So they want people to be that hive mind. So they infect us with a brain virus, which is why it seems a lot like a brain virus. Like it looks a lot like they've been infected with a mental illness, and and a lot like they're demons running around as though they're possessed.
Yeah,
just because they have actually been infected by an alien brain virus. But I think that's the coolest explanation. So I like to run with that one.
Yeah, well, I think it's like, I mean, there could be stuff going on outside this dimension and stuff we can't see with our eyes that are going on to make people like this. But there's the talk about the microchipping and stuff and how they want to basically create a hive mind and they can control us by microchipping us. But yeah, those lefties, man, there's definitely something wrong with them. Like, do you know like how they have huge rates of like mental health problems and stuff?
Oh,
do you know
of course,
much about
they
that?
have all that kind of thing because they're fundamentally broken people. So the fact that they would have a large rate of mental illness is almost to be expected. They are broken. A lot of them had rough upbringings, or actually a lot of them were like spoiled little brats, and they are devoid of meaning and are just trying to fit in. And it's actually a really complicated thing, but you'll see a lot of the hardcore ones, like the blue-haired, green-haired feminazis and the really hardcore Trotskyist socialists. They are properly mentally ill.
Hey,
then you get a lot of people, like a lot of the people that I saw at the so-called Invasion Day rally. If you haven't, on my channel I did a vlog. That's another kind of video that I do vlogs as well, which seem to be quite popular. But a lot of the people at the Invasion Day rally are just white middle-class university kids. So I suspect a lot of them are just there to fit in. So they've gone to university and they're professors who are infected with the brain virus are trying to infect other people, and maybe a couple of attractive young ladies say, let's go down to this Invasion Day rally, and they're like, oh, yeah, let's go along. So just a lot of weak men trying to chase punani, and weak women who have been brainwashed or just want to fit in with their professor or whatever. So, I mean, there's more than one kind of leftist, but ultimately it is a satanic, demonic brain virus that they are infected with, and they're broken people. It's unfortunate, but I think a lot of them are actually unsalvageable. I think they can't be saved, which is sad. There are plenty of people in that crowd that we could save, but there are a large number. The most prominent and outspoken ones are usually ones that are just irredeemable.
Are a lot of them like drug addicts or medical drug addicts?
Oh, I mean, I don't know what the exact statistics are, but I would say a lot of them would be going out on the weekend doing party drugs like MDMA and all that kind of stuff. Now, I've done MDMA quite a lot in my life, and I can tell you that once you do it, it's fun for like a few hours, but then the next week after that, you're just a miserable, tired and grumpy individual. So I don't do it anymore because I don't think it's worth it. It's not worth the buzz. It just makes you too unhappy for for a whole week. It's like, why am I even doing this? This is just a waste of time. And it's all fake as well. Like, you feel so happy and lovey, and then it all disappears, and it just feels like it's artificial. So kids, don't do drugs.
Yeah, I remember when I tried some drugs and that, it was a similar thing. It was like, that it's just the drug that's doing it when you feel like happy, and it's just sort of weird, but it just doesn't work that way when you're only like smiling weirdly because of the drug. It's just really weird. But anyway, but about the mind stuff, I went to Neil Erickson's court case. He had one like a month ago or 2 months ago, right? And there was a lefty that was suing him, right, for a breach of an intervention order, right? Yet the lefty, of course, rocked up to the rally that he was organising, right? So he was organising the right-wing rally. The lefty rocked up, knowing that he would be there, and then said, "Hey, you're near me. You're breaching the intervention order, right?" So it's a load of crap, right?
How did the judge find that one?
The judge was on Neil's side. Yeah, exactly, and it was actually it was really good. Yeah. He had a great win, and the judge helped him through it. But the judge was only being fair. I mean, the judge didn't do anything wrong by helping him. It was just like it was a bullshit case. But that's how
an intervention order actually works. Like he's just following he's just going by the book. I've had to take out intervention orders before and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go in depth into that story, but yeah, if you take an intervention order out against someone, then you breach the intervention order yourself. You're actually in breach of the intervention order, not the person who it's against.
Yeah,
that's how it works. So the judge is just doing his job properly.
Yeah, well, and the lefty was actually a former murderer, and he was autistic, and he heard voices in his head and stuff.
Oh yeah, that
guy.
This
is where I'm talking about, because someone might be listening, going, "What are you talking about? Like a brain virus? What do you mean calling lefties mentally ill?" And it's just like, no, they really are. Like, not all
of them
probably
are.
Yeah,
it's a I think that aside from the ones who are pushing it from the very, very top, it is a genuine mental illness, but it's one that's often transmitted. It's transmitted through dialogue and narrative in terms of leftism. But the people who it infects are people who are susceptible to that kind of brainwashing.
Yeah, and there was another recent murder of a young girl in Melbourne, the Aya murder in Bundoora, right? And that was by a guy who was Aboriginal, and he'd been to some lefty protests, right? Did you hear about that?
I actually didn't hear. Really? Did he?
He was a lefty. Him and his sister were a lefty. Yeah, and there's a photo of him and his sister with some like notable.
Is that
politician.
Is that in a news story? How did you find that?
There's memes of it, and Blair Cottrell mentioned it as well. But it's not. I'm not making it up. Like, I mean, I'm serious. This guy, the murderer, was attending some of the lefty rallies, and apparently he was at the St Kilda rally, the so-called Nazi rally, right?
I'd love. Sorry to interrupt. I'd love to actually see some hard evidence of that. I mean, I'm not that I don't believe you. I do believe you, and if Blair said it, then it's almost certainly correct. But I would love to actually see the real evidence of that. Someone who knew him personally coming out and saying it, all that kind of thing, because it's actually good content. I was considering doing a story about that because did you saw how Clementine Ford's come out, and Tim Williams from The Unshackled has a screenshot of her saying essentially, it's probably going to be a white man. And then it turns out that it wasn't a white man. Yeah. You notice how like the media were all ready to go hard on the Eurydice Dixon narrative of, men this and men that. Then all of a sudden they find out that it's an Aboriginal kid. No, he's an aspiring rapper and it's mental illness and et cetera, et cetera. They suddenly change the narrative. So if we could get some evidence that it was a proper leftist, then it would make it an excellent YouTube video.
Yeah, look into it.
But you need the evidence. You need someone who's actually heard either reporting testimonial or reporting or who knows him. I mean, hearsay, if someone's reporting what he said, it is hearsay, but if they knew him well or if they are a credible witness of some kind, then it does still make a good story.
Well, there's a photo of him with his sister, and they're at some event, some lefty event, or they're with some lefty, like some Greens Party politician or something. So there's evidence out there, and you can find it. But that would make a great video. Maybe a video about how many of the radical lefties actually have mental illness or something like that, or are psycho killers. Something like that.
It'd be interesting to go in through that, like with the actual story itself. Yeah, it is a mental illness ultimately, and a lot of them are psychopaths or sociopaths or just zombie people who aren't all that bright. You see a lot of them are, especially the most hardcore ones, are genuine sociopaths in that they can convince themselves like that. Doesn't matter how untrue it is, but they will convince themselves that something is true and there is absolutely nothing you can do to change their mind. It's almost schizophrenic in a lot of ways. The hardcore socialists and the hardcore communists, they are the biggest liars, and the number one person that they lie to is themselves. And you can see, because they believe the rubbish that they're speaking. It's hilarious trolling some of them because you know exactly how they're going to react. You bring up facts and they'll just instantly, no this, no that, or not. The old not real socialism meme that is now essentially a parody of itself when they say it.
Doesn't this come from Karl Marx? Didn't he have a shady past? I heard from Stefan Molyneux about Karl Marx's past and how he was shifty and lied and did dodgy things and stuff, and so it makes sense that they're communists coming,
He was a horrendous individual. He was actually a really terrible, terrible person who was a violent alcoholic who was horrible with money, was constantly in debt, constantly trying to get money, didn't actually work. He just sat in the library and just read books and stuff and, wrote his papers and his journalism. He wrote his articles, I should say, I can't remember which paper he was writing in, but he was essentially calling for revolution constantly. And one of the things he did as well, he had a family, a family where he was married to. His children, he's essentially neglected his kids. They ultimately killed themselves. And he had another child to his maidservant or a servant who was just in the family, and he just kicked her out. He had a son with her, and just kicked her out. No, he was a terrible individual. He was a terrible person. So you can't be surprised when the ideology that he creates is one that produces nothing but misery and suffering.
Yeah, and he apparently borrowed money and didn't pay it back.
Yeah, all the time.
It was
From his
dodgy.
parents as well. His
Uh,
family.
L. Ron Hubbard, the creator of Scientology, he has, maybe you learnt it with the people you're working with, but you know the tone scale, how the people are in anger and some people are in fear.
I understand. Yeah,
some
I remember
people in
all that.
happiness. One of them was 1-1, and 1-1 is like a shifty person, right? A really bad person. It's the worst tone out of them all. And he labelled as one of their traits is that they tend to be socialistic and communistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, because a lot of them, they've got this sort of fakeness about them, because that's the thing about the 1-1 is that they're fake. They're not really honest and genuine. And so with these lefties, like, they twist words and they're fake and they're just not honest. And that's why they hate.
The number one thing is, you're correct there, the number one thing that is fundamental across all leftists, and it's actually core to leftist ideology, is lies. And this is why it's fundamentally satanic, because Satan is the master of deceivers and the master liar. So what Satan is, even if you don't believe in the whole metaphysical thing, I mean, I do believe that there are spiritual entities within our universe. So that's my belief. But I actually believe that it's all part of the same kind of thing. But I won't get into that, too complicated. But
no, but you can get into that sort of stuff if you want, because that's the sort of stuff spiritual stuff we deal in more. Usually we don't talk politics on this podcast, but I want to bring you in because it's just such a mess. People don't understand the left-wing agenda and the communist agenda and how we have to not vote for shit like the global warming crap. I mean, what's going on with that? You know.
Well,
but anyway, go on with what you're saying. I'll ask you about global warming later.
What it is ultimately is, so do you ever watch Jordan Peterson? Like, have you ever watched any of his content and all that kind of stuff? I actually get crap from some people in the nationalist community because I'm a fairly hard ethnic nationalist who is also a fan of Jordan Peterson, and a lot of people who are ethnic nationalists don't like him because he doesn't really talk about ethnic nationalism all that much. But I really like him, and one of the things he says is that human beings, we bring existence into being through our consciousness, and the number one way we do that is through words. And what especially the Bible teaches, and other religions, but especially the Bible, is that when you tell the truth, the being that comes into existence is generally good. And when you tell lies and deceit, the being that comes into existence is generally bad. So this is why Satan is the master deceiver. So Satan is the one that tells the lies, because when you tell lies, bad and evil and bad stuff comes into existence. And so that's what ultimately, in a metaphysical sense, evil operates in the realm of dishonesty, in the realm of lies, and leftist ideologies are based fundamentally on lies. And this is how.
Can you explain that, by the way? Because I remember you mentioned it before, and I was like, "What do you mean? It's based on lies?"
So it's lies. It's all lies. It's based on the fundamental lie, firstly, that we're all equal, and and that et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at it at its very, very core, fundamental spiritual root, it is an ideology of dishonesty and deception. Everything about the thing ideology is fake. It's dishonest. It's in that sort of realm, which is why everything that comes out of it is ultimately evil, and why all the people within that seem strange. It's like they seem like they're outside reality, because they are actually operating outside reality. They're operating in a reality that is fundamentally dishonest and fundamentally opposed to truthful reality. So it's two completely different spiritual realms, one of truth and one of lies, and they're living in lies, and God, Jesus, all the good elements of the universe live in the truth. And one of the things that makes Western civilization so great is the fact that we realize that truth is far more important than almost any other principle, and telling the truth and telling the truth and finding the truth and seeking the truth, I suppose that's the same thing, but ultimately we base our civilization around the seeking and telling of truthfulness, which is why we've been able to grow to be the greatest civilization in existence. And as I said before, and as I've repeatedly Marxism is fundamentally about lies, which is why it tears everything down, which is why Marxism and why the left are so hell-bent on destroying Western civilization and ultimately just hell-bent on destroying white men, because white men are the number one purveyors and seekers of the truth in the entire world, which is why ethnic nationalism is actually so important and why it's divine. I believe, actually, I know that it is divinely written that we must support our own white ethnic identity and we must preserve it and fight for it and be proud of our racial identity and tell people that you need to be proud of your racial identity, because especially white men are so – we're different when it comes to the truth. We've essentially evolved and been bred into truth tellers and truth seekers, which is why no other race or ethnic identity does it to anywhere near the extent that white people do, which is why it is fundamentally a holy war of white people against globalism, and why we are going to win in the end, because God doesn't lose. Ultimately, he just doesn't lose.
Yeah.
In no universe ever in existence has God lost this battle, and that's something that should give everyone a great deal of confidence, because there could be a great deal of destruction or whatever. I mean, bad stuff is definitely going to happen in our universe, just because that's the way that it is while we learn and grow. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, truth and God wins, because truth is more powerful than anything. And this is what Satan and why in Bible says, this Bible calls Satan the liar and ultimately like that, because the way to defeat ultimate evil is by seeking the truth and telling the truth. That's why, again, Marxists attack any YouTuber or any counter-narrative that's telling the truth so fervently, or the left attack them so hard, because they are telling the truth, and the truth is the number one weapon against lies.
Yeah.
See, Blair Cottrell, I'll finish this. I'll finish this now and you can go to the next section. But Blair Cottrell recently had a really good post on Twitter where he said that it takes a lot of resources to build and maintain a lie, and ultimately that can be taken down by one man daring to tell the truth consistently or persistently and without fear, because the best thing to destroy a lie is the truth, and it's the only thing that can ultimately destroy a lie.
Yeah, I'll give you and the way that the left-wing media and the way the lefties, let's say, they attack Blair Cottrell, I don't know, he mentioned something about Hitler's books and schools, but they completely took it out of context, and they said that he was calling for all schools to have
it's a fake account.
Hitler
you know
books.
that, right? It's actually a fake account. It's not even a real account. He never said that.
Yeah, so they just completely make up shit. They don't actually come up with real arguments to attack people. But with the lies that they also spread is that there is differences between the races, and just acknowledging that isn't racist. But they try and deny that there's differences between the races, and they try and hide the evidence of that and all the statistics and stuff, and they try and hide it through the universities. They try and cover it up. They go, it's not politically correct. And then also with gender, there's differences between the gender, and acknowledging that isn't sexist or anything. It's just acknowledging that men and women are different. But again, through the universities and all that sort of stuff, and through their bullshit political correctness, they try and cover that up. So they just deal in lies.
And I just want to add something to that. Those two words there, racist and sexist, are communist creations. The first ever recorded instance of the term racist was actually Leon Trotsky, in reference to, I believe it was Slavic nationals who just wanted to keep their own culture. So it was literally created in order to demonize white people who just want to keep their own culture. And that has then obviously morphed into all of white people. That's the term racist. Now, I'm pretty sure I'd have to double check. I'd have to go back and check my sources on this one, but I'm pretty sure the term racism is about 20 years older than the term racist, and it was created by a virulently racist man named Franz Boas, who hated white people. He created the anthropology, I believe. He was an anthropologist, and I think he might have actually created it. And he used the idea of racism again, to stop criticism of non-white cultures who were brutal and savage. So he was trying to create sort of a cultural relativism and say that, oh, these cultures are just the same as white Western culture, and if you disagree with that, it's just racism. It's like you're using racism against those cultures. So both, though, that word racism, the answer to that is to completely reject them outright and call them out for what they are. There is no such thing as racism. There's racial hate. There's hatred based on race, which is just racial hate. You can hate someone based on the color of their skin or their genetics, which is a bad thing. But the term racism, it doesn't mean anything. It's just made up by communists to silence whites.
And also, these things apparently are being run by top bankers, right, that are coming up with these things like the racism and the gender crap, because they want to open up the borders so they can benefit from that, and so they can also get more women in the workforce and stuff. Like, there's apparently something where the Rockefellers were talking about it and saying, yeah, we started the whole women's liberation and feminism and stuff just as an excuse to get women into the workforce. So, like, I mean, these lefties are adopting these things that are actually secretly being run by evil top bankers, and they don't even know it.
Exactly, and even if you presented them hardcore, solid, undeniable evidence of it, they'd still reject it.
Yeah. So have you heard about stuff about the bankers starting communism in the 1917 in Russia?
I'm not fully over that. I've heard stories about, Rothschilds funding World War One, and I think they actually did fund World War One. I don't really get into these discussions because I'm not all over them. I mean, I understand how central banking works and all that kind of thing, but I'm not the person that you want to be discussing those with, because I'm not anywhere near competent enough in that area to make any statement that would be anything new compared to what other people might otherwise be able to explain to you.
Yeah. L. Ron Hubbard mentioned stuff in the 60s about how there was like a global plan to set up like a police state and stuff, and to have no borders, to get rid of the American Constitution, and also to get the youth all hooked on marijuana. And it's just interesting because in the 60s that did start to come in, like marijuana got real popular. And then you got Alex Jones, who reckons that George Soros is a part of the marijuana pushing, and that he also is a part of making the marijuana much more potent than what it was in the 60s.
Could be George Soros, could be market forces as well. I mean, in terms of drug prohibition, I'm actually completely against drug prohibition because I think it's ultimately a counterproductive measure. Unless there's some sort of externality, you shouldn't be telling people what they can and can't do with their own bodies. So for things like ice, methamphetamines, I'd say, yes, definitely keep those illegal because they create negative externalities. People get psychopathic and start hurting others, and it's quite common, and they're uncontrollable. Like, they lose, even with alcohol is a little bit different, because alcohol you lose control, but it sort of exacerbates emotions. Methamphetamines just makes people snap and go psychopathic. But things like marijuana, MDMA, the LSD, hallucinogenics, all that kind of stuff, I think it's actually infinitely preferable that they're legalized and regulated. It's much safer for them if they're legal as well. Like, you see all these stories of kids going up to music festivals and overdosing. It's because they don't know what they're getting. They don't know how strong the stuff that they're getting is. They don't know what's in it. They don't know if it's safe, if it's actually what they're told that it is. It's not safe to be buying drugs on the black market. So if they really wanted to cut safety or if they really wanted to improve safety at these music festivals, and if they really actually cared about safety, they just make party drugs legal and then on the box you can say, this is how much this is. You should not take more than this. Do not take more than this. Consult your doctor before taking them, things like that. And that would make it a hell of a lot safer. And then if something happens, then it's the own person's fault they were being stupid. The same thing with alcohol. Like, people die from alcohol overdose all the time, and it's, the risks. You drink that much and you get alcohol poisoning. It's just, don't be an idiot. People need to be treated as grown-ups. What I don't like is this it's not paternal, it's maternal, it's maternalistic government that tells us what we can and can't do with our own bodies, and also what we can and can't say, who we can and can't associate with.
Yeah.
what we can and can't advocate for within our society. It's purely a maternalistic instinct, and there is a reason that women didn't have the vote for a very long, that women didn't exercise political power for a very long time. Hate to break it to you if there are a number of strong independent women listening to this podcast, but there is a very good reason that women didn't participate in politics. And,
they didn't want to back then as well, though, because they thought it was they were resisting it. Like, seriously, 100 years ago they were resisting it because they were saying, hey, this is like not our area, and this will distract us and stop us from being good mothers. You know what I mean? And
it's correct.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is women don't participate in violence. Generally, obviously there are some women who do, but generally they don't, and really they shouldn't either. So for them to be able to participate in politics through the vote, which is ultimately violence, it means they're essentially getting something for nothing. So men participate in the vote. We vote as a substitute for war. So we go to the vote, and that stops us. Okay, we're going to vote for this, and we're going to represent our exercise of violence through the ballot box. And it's a trade-off between that and war. So what it does is it saves men's lives and it saves men's resources, and that's how we resolve that issue. Because women don't actually participate in any kind of violence, and then you allow them into the voting area where they are the majority, so they can exercise their majority power with violence over men whilst not ever participating in violence. There's no surprise. It should be no surprise that once we allowed women to vote, we ended up getting massive welfare states, and we have this women's liberation and all this other rubbish, which is actually destroying our countries. No, women shouldn't be allowed to vote. And I know there's going to be people who are saying, people are going to be saying, no, how could you say that? Well, I just explained to you exactly how I could say that.
Do you know,
it's actually a horrible thing to do to men. It's actually oppressive of men. It's oppression of men allowing women to vote because of that reason, because they have all the benefits of participating in violence and very few of the drawbacks.
I gotta elaborate on this because this is a bit of a hot topic because this might offend some women. But I've looked into it, right, and I know for sure women are more able to be tricked by propaganda, and that's why I'm certain.
I should put some headphones on just in case there's an echo there. I didn't realise.
I've looked into it, right, and I know for sure that women are more easily affected by propaganda. Like, for example, because they've got the more caring, nurturing side to them and stuff. If you show them a baby getting killed or like a cat getting its head cut off, it really sends off their emotions, right? And men have more of they're less emotional because we're more like warriors and we're supposed to, like, you know, be a man and that. And so we don't get affected as much by the emotions. So with the propaganda, I'm not even saying they shouldn't be allowed to have a vote or anything, but I'm just saying that when you allow them to have a vote, then it makes it a lot easier for these elites, these bankers, to come up with propaganda, you know, about, care about the trees and the babies, and like they'll show the babies and they'll go, they get these diseases from you got to give them the vaccines and stuff, but the vaccines are secretly like jacked with all this bullshit. So anyway, so they're just more able to be manipulated and stuff more than a man is. And I'll take that to the grave. And I know it's offensive to say it, but I do think that men are less able to be propagandized than women.
You're 100% correct. They are far more susceptible to emotional arguments. But I just explained to you just before exactly why you don't even need that argument. Women don't participate in violence. Therefore, women should not be allowed to participate in violence that is the vote. It's as simple as that. Unless you are, for whatever reason, subject to the negative externality of violence, or unless you have to suffer the consequences of the inaction of violence yourself, then you should not ever, ever participate in violence, which is actually why I think Starship Troopers had it right, in that only people who have served in the military should ever have a chance to participate in the vote, other than maybe a few exceptions of people who offer great service and selflessly offer their service to the nation or whatever it is. But only someone who truly understands how violence works and what it is should ever have a say in how it's enacted. Obviously, everyone should have a chance, like every man should have a chance to serve if they have what it takes or if they want to. And we need, there should be a constitution to protect people's rights and all that kind of thing. But you can't just hand the vote out to anyone. Even if it was just men voting, the system would still end up in parasitism like it did in ancient Greece. Democracy always fails, whether it's men and men or whether it's men only or whether it's men and women. When you allow women to vote, it fails spectacularly, and we get flooded with hordes of non-white people into our own countries, destroying our nation, and ultimately leading us towards what could potentially be a very devastating civil war, which is what I really don't want.
Yeah, I know. We had the problem with the African gangs and stuff, and it's just like, I mean, of course, anyway, the crime rates amongst them is much higher. Like, I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to pretend like it's not a fact, like what the police do and all the leftists do. It's just like, it's just obvious. You look at it, you see a young white kid and he's 5% likely to be a criminal. You see a young black kid who's 30% likely to be a criminal. Well, I think it would just be better if we just didn't let them in. You know what I mean? But anyway, on the women thing though, it seems like it was a plan to break up the family, to get the women voting and get them distracted and not interested in being involved and being a good mother and stuff. And that could all be a part of like a depopulation thing, because they don't want them. Yeah.
It is ultimately a satanic plan pushed by globalist elites to destroy Western civilization, and that means destroying white families. So you get women out into the workforce, they're less likely to have kids, pushes prices up, and then you tax them and makes them have a lot less kids again. It's actually insidious, and it comes with all this anti-white propaganda, and we're constantly being told that we should be ashamed of our past and the colonialism and all that kind of insidious rubbish, which is just really, really bad. It's pure evil. It is actually satanic. I actually think that a lot of the leftists in politics and the leftists who are high up in academia and the globalist elite, I actually think they are genuinely possessed by a demonic presence.
Yeah,
even if it's not a conscious demonic presence getting into them, because if you want to talk spirituality, I actually think it is, and this is just from the knowledge that I've learned and based on just my own reasoning as well, is that this universe is actually all us. So we're all actually the same universe. Ultimately, we're all created by God as a child of God, living as this universe. So you're me, I'm you. Everyone's exactly the same thing. And there are other religions that say or believe that there is a universal memory. And I think there's been some certain scientists or something like that. I'm just talking off the top of my head here, that say that there is potentially evidence of a universal memory. Actually, one guy wrote a book called Morphic Resonance, which I haven't read yet, which argues that there is strong evidence of some sort of universal memory. And just because of the way that universe is made up, I think that we're all actually ultimately the same thing. So we're all the universe. Think about this, right? Like you are the universe. Ultimately, everything from the biggest thing to the smallest thing in the universe is the universe, and we all came from the same infinitesimally small point. So we're all the same thing. So ultimately, what this demonic evil is, it's like it's a part of ourselves, sort of swirling and through interdimensional space, and it's sort of the way that we're learning and the way that we're teaching ourselves, and it's like because of that. I'm not explaining it I'm trying to explain it as best as I can, in that ultimately it's about us learning to treat ourselves better. And we've got this presence here, which is this demonic, dishonest, deceitful, lying part of ourselves within the universe that is ultimately hell-bent on our own destruction. And then you've got the truth and the good part going towards God. So I'm not articulating it very well because I haven't spoken about it very much. I haven't written about it or anything like that. But I probably have to go and think about it a little bit more in order to articulate it a lot better. But hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. I think they are actually possessed by a demonic presence, but I actually think the demonic presence is ultimately us. Now, if you think about it, there is a devil inside all of us, and they're just what they are really doing is allowing their own demonic presence inside them, their own monster to take hold and take over them. So it is them allowing it. So they are possessed by a demon. It's just that the demon is them.
Yeah, well, and the upper levels in Scientology, people know about this sort of stuff. It deals a bit in the entities, and that's the thing is, I remember I was around someone who he wasn't like a passionate leftist, but he was someone who could easily get caught up in that crowd, and he had like leftist leaning ideas, and he also seemed a bit homosexual as well, and he seemed to be. I perceived someone who was. I was actually doing a Scientology course with him. So I was spending a lot of time with him because he twin up. But he seemed to be not in control of his own body. Like, it seemed like he was possessed. Like, and you have to spend a lot of time around these people, but they do odd things, the way they move and that, and you just sort of like, you know, you're like, there's something else going on.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of outside presence or outside of their particular manifestation of the universe, like them, like their own spiritual presence. There could be something outside them influencing them, whether you call it archons or demons or entities or whatever it is. Ultimately, they are possessed by something that isn't good. There's some sort of possession there, whether it's their demons on the inside, whether it's external, whether we're all the same thing, all that kind of stuff. They're not in control of their faculties. They're not in control of their mind, and there's no point dealing with these people.
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah,
there's no point.
There's not
ever trying to convince them. The number one strategy in defeating them is to demonize them, mock them, and avoid them. Demonize, mock, avoid. You can shame them. You can even do the stuff that they do. You know, it's gossip, shame, rallying. It's gossip, shame, rallying, moralizing, and something else that starts with R, which comes from proprietarianism. But this is what they do. They try and shame you and attack you into believing what you want. So you can actually just throw it straight back in their face if you really want to, and it's quite effective. They get really, really angry when you do it well. They get quite upset because they're not used to non-leftists throwing it back in their face. They're used to non-leftists trying to reason with them, but that's a mistake because you can't possibly reason with them. Yeah. That's a waste of effort.
They're broken calculators. It's like dealing with a broken calculator. It's never going to work.
It's exactly. So there's no point bothering to try and reason with them. Never debate them, mock them, destroy them, show them that you have no respect for them at all. Make them feel ashamed for ever opening their mouth if you can, and then just don't spend your time with them. The only time you should ever actually give them your time with a debate is when there's a public audience, and then you're trying to convince the audience and, again, mock them and destroy them and rip their arguments apart. Well, they're not arguments. Just rip what they're saying apart as thoroughly as you possibly can.
I just thought of how the lefties are a lie, because you got the Greens, right, who were originally people who were cared about the environment, but the lefties came in and twisted it and made it so that they were like suddenly communistic, and they were suddenly wanting like gay rights and transsexuals everywhere and gender and all that sort of stuff. So they took something and then they just twist it and they change it. You know what I mean? And then it's like it's not really a Green Party. You know, they're not really pushing caring about the trees. They used to years ago, but then they got infiltrated, and now all the lefties are pushing communism.
They're essentially communists, like this Green New Deal in the United States, which was communists. Did you see one of the motions, or one of the parts of this Green New Deal that the far left of the Democratic Party proposed said provision for people who are unable and unwilling to work. So even if you don't want to work, they'll provide for you. Rightly got mocked and laughed at and thrown out of Congress because it is properly ridiculous. But even then, it's there. It's in the Democratic Party. It's part of their movement. So they are the ones who are ultimately responsible for it. They let these people in, and I have no idea why.
How do you, so we've talked a little bit about some of the lefty stuff, right? So you can spot if a politician's lefty or what are lefty beliefs or whatever. What are some of the right-wing ideas and stuff? So we'd like define right-wing a bit more.
Ultimately, truth-seeking, seeking of the truth, working in the truth. It's a masculine trait. It's actually fundamentally the difference between masculine and feminine truth and deception. Now, that's not an attack on women. I mean, that's people are going to say, "Oh, what do you mean women are about deception?" No, it's fundamentally it's a strategy for getting what you want. And so men operate in truth, but men could also operate in force. That's toxic masculinity, if you want to give it that rubbish name. But that's the bad masculinity, and then you got the good femininity, which is caring and loving. But then feminine coercion is ultimately deception, the way women get what they want, unless they offer value to the man in a truthful and honest manner. It is through lies and deception. But in terms of right-wing people want less regulation in economics. So that's the traditional way of putting it. But you could also put it in terms of nationalist and globalist. Globalists on the left, nationalists on the right. It's almost a false dichotomy in a lot of ways, but you can always, if you want to go setting up dichotomies, you can just set it up as right-wing means truth, or non-leftists live in the truth, and the left are deceivers and liars. That's the simplest way of putting it. Again, calling someone a leftist doesn't necessarily mean you're putting them on a left-right divide. It's like it's a label that you can put on someone, because we all know what a leftist is. You can see them, they yell and screech, they have ridiculous ideas based on economics, and often they'll push globalism. They won't necessarily push globalism. You can have left-wing socialists as well. There's the one, if you know what I mean. But it's not necessarily nationalist versus globalist. Ultimately, I think the battle that we're in is between the forces of lies and deception versus the ideals of truth, which makes it's actually a spiritual war that we're in. It's one between good and evil, lies, truth. That's where it is fundamentally. And the way you want to look at it is just leftists are leftists. And if you're not a leftist, then you're not a leftist, whatever your ideology or whatever your beliefs might be.
Now, that's good, that idea of lies and truth, because then you can look at in an area like a politician you want to vote for or whatever, and if there's one that's dealing in lies and falsehood and being fake, then you know that's more the left-wing person, and then the one that's being more honest and truthful is more the right-wing. And the leftist, they hate how Trump is just honest, that they want him to lie. Whereas Trump, sometimes he says things that might sound a bit rude, but hey, at least you know he's being a real person, and that's what you want more out of a politician. I don't care if the politician says rude stuff, as long as I know he's telling the truth. I hate the lying. It's the shiftiness, because you don't know and it tricks you, Yeah,
that's why he ultimately ended up winning, especially helped that he was up against the most dishonest and horrendous candidate the Democrats possibly put up in Hillary Clinton. But the problem I have with Trump now, and I was a Trump fan, it's like as soon as I start going, yes, he's great, he comes out with this State of the Union address and says that he wants to increase immigration to the United States, which ultimately means he wants to increase non-white immigration, which is idiotic for a Republican to do it, because it just means they're going to lose power. People who aren't white tend to vote for the left. It's a fact. It's a statistical fact. Even if they vote for the right at the start, doesn't matter whether they're Asian, Hispanic, black, any of them, they all tend to vote for the left, including especially even Jews, all of them.
Is that because a lot of the immigrants, they get welfare from the left? A lot of them are coming here and just getting welfare?
A lot. That's part of it as well. Also, racial solidarity. And think about what I told you earlier in the discussion. White Western men, especially, have evolved as truth seekers, living in a truthful world, trying to find what is reality and living as truthfully as possible. And this is what Western civilization is based on, and this is how we created such a good civilization. So when foreigners come in, they haven't. Well, I mean, obviously, this is all generalities. Obviously, there are white men who vote left, all that kind of thing.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good in the 50s when you think about it. In the 50s and the 60s, like, I mean, it was a pretty good civilization, like, as in it was good money and it was well structured and stuff. And, you know, it was like you could just afford a car and 3 kids and that.
You could have one man with a job, have 4 kids, their own house, their own car, and it would be totally fine. That's completely changed now because of high taxation and welfare, regulations supporting multinational businesses, women getting into the workforce. All these things associated with globalists and left-wing politics have ultimately ruined our civilization. The problem I see with a lot of conservatives, even people like Donald Trump, is that they aren't going hard on the racial politics. They're not race realists. I understand why they're not race realists, because we've had decades of propaganda telling us that you can't do that. It's racist. But like I just said, the term racist is purely communist propaganda designed to vilify white people, which is why it's a term that we should completely reject. But even Donald Trump hasn't gone far enough on that, because he's a boomer ultimately. Well, I think he might even be older than a boomer. I'm not sure, but they've had this propaganda shoved down their throats that white people can't have in-group preference. White people can't advocate for their own race. White people can't do this. White people can't do that. So it takes a lot of de-brainwashing and deconditioning to get people out of that mode. I mean, I know I was on the CivNat side for so long, and I was on that side, so I completely empathise with it. But once you're out of it and can see what's actually going on, it makes you weep what people are doing, and it makes you weep how much damage these people are actually doing to our society, and how much damage even groups like in Australia, the Coalition, who have not done anything to fight it. They've just been afraid of this label of being a racist. And they're bringing guys like Malcolm Turnbull or even Malcolm Fraser, who opened the floodgates on non-white immigration. So they've done a lot to destroy our civilization. It's not the left. Like, the left is always going to be the left. The biggest culprits are those who are supposedly on the right, who have allowed them to get away with it and have allowed them to shame whites into submission ultimately. And part of what I'm doing with my channel now, especially in the last sort of 5-6 months, is just to say, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be extremely proud of my racial heritage and who I am, and I'm going to stand up for my people as a people. And I think it's resonating with people. I think my channel started seeing much more growth since I did that, because it gets the core of who we are. It gets to who we are as individuals within this universe. God created the races. It's natural law for people to associate with their own ethnic group. This is what was designed. Like, it's part of the laws of nature. A nation is individual, surrounded by their family, surrounded by their extended family, surrounded by the extended family, who are the community, and the extended family out of that, which is the nation. This is how we evolved, and this is what God created. So this is what we need to ultimately be fighting for. And the beauty of that is
keeping our culture. It's just like keeping your culture and not,
it's keeping who we are. We have the right to exist in our own lands under our own laws and without interference from outside ethnic groups, which is ultimately outside genetic material if you want to look at it from an evolutionary biological standpoint. They have no right to come into our nations and parasite off our stuff. And here's the thing, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of non-white people who are fantastic individuals, extremely productive and all that kind of thing. It's also not fair for us to take those people into our civilizations. They should be in their own nations, making their own people better. We have no right to take the best of others as well. They should be going back to where they came from and building their own countries up, knowing what they know now, knowing that they can now spread the values of Western civilization, which is ultimately the values of the truth and natural law and natural order.
Well, look, someone might listening to this might think it sounds racist what we're talking about, but here's the thing: we have to talk about this.
They're going to think that because that's what they've been programmed to think.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's what they've been told to think. What do you mean? White people can't advocate for that. Like, white people can't say that. Think about this. If I was any other ethnic group, any other race, no one would bat an eyelid. No one would say anything. If I was black, white, or if I was black, Asian, Jewish, Hispanic, they'd be like, we don't care. It'd be totally fine. The only reason they care is because I'm white. I mean, how horrible is that? That's evil. It is absolutely pure evil. Anyway, keep on going.
Yeah, like an Aboriginal guy can go and say, I'm defending my race and you can't, blah, 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 blah. And he will go on ABC and he'll say all this stuff. But then if a white guy says the same thing, it's like, oh, no, he's racist. And it's just like, whoa, can't he defend his own race? But anyway, I mean, the reason why we're talking about this and why it's important is because we're trying to prevent what's happening in South Africa. I mean, if you just look into what's going on there, if those white people in South Africa actually put their foot down and said no in the 70s or 80s or whatever and just kept saying no, then they would be a lot better off. But now, since the 80s or whatever, I mean, they've been coming to Melbourne, these South Africans, because things have gone so wild there. So it might sound rude to bring up how black people on average have lower IQs. That's just pure fact, but it might sound a bit rude to bring that up, right? And it might sound rude to defend our white race and say we only want white people coming into Australia. But hey, I don't want things to turn into South Africa. So shut up, and we're not going to allow this place to turn into South Africa. Sorry.
We also don't want it to turn into China or India either, and we definitely don't want it to turn into a balkanized state. It's not even white. It's not even just white civilization. The next on the list is Japan. So Japanese people better watch out. They're going to get subverted next, and then it's Korean people.
Yeah, because the Japanese people
it's not just whites.
They don't allow any. In Japan, they don't allow any immigration, and they've got no terrorist attacks. So that's what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's just like, hey, it might be mean to say something about Muslims, but hey, they're freaking well blowing things up. In Japan, there's no terrorist attacks. So it's just like, Yeah, it's exactly right. And every ethnic group has the right to self-determination and to live by its own rules and not be flooded by foreigners. I mean, the Aboriginal one's an interesting one because on my channel, I get a lot of Aboriginal activists or Aboriginal people just saying the most horrible things about white people because of the opinions and the ideas that I'm expressing. They say some of the most horrible things, and they seem totally fine with just the most virulent anti-white hatred. Now, I'm not against Aborigines self-determining. Like, there's plenty of communities in Northern Territories and Western Australia where if they wanted to go and self-determine and they want to live by their own culture, by all means, please go over there and live by your own laws. Just don't demand Australian taxpayer money. Just don't demand our money and don't allow in any kind of foreign agent or anything like that. But I have nothing against Aboriginal people living by their own customs and their own laws if that's what they freely choose to do of their own accord. Just don't parasite off white people. It's a really, really simple request, and I don't think there's anything immoral about saying that. They've got so much space in Australia. I mean, there's just so much empty space. There's plenty of rivers they can go to and stuff, but they just like to, go in and get their Centrelink.
And if they want to do that, all right, that's fine. You can do that. We're offering that. It's like I'm not against anyone taking that offer up. Just don't attack and demonize the people that you're taking the money off. I mean, that's abusive. It's horrible. It's a horrible thing for them to do.
I mean, we've gone into it's
you're going to get into trouble. Some people, you're going to get into trouble. Someone's going to be like, "Oh my God, I thought you were a nice boy. You're talking about race politics."
Yeah, no, I know. It's just like what I'm trying to say is it's very not PR. Do you know what I mean by that? Like
PC,
not public,
you mean?
Like, yeah, well, no, I mean public relations. Like, as in, it's dirty, it's boy talk, it's like locker talk, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not pretty, but we need to talk about these sort of things, right?
It's truthful, though.
Yeah,
it's the main thing is that you remain truthful.
Exactly, it is truthful. And sorry, I'm just going to bring up, because I mean, L. Ron Hubbard talked about some of this sort of stuff. I mean, he came up with, there's a step called grade 2 in Scientology, and that involves a fair bit of like a confessional, you know, like in the Catholic Church. It's similar to that, but there's a special one for South Africans, right? Because L. Ron Hubbard had spent some time there, and he knew he needs to develop a different one for the people there. And he actually said that there, and he was talking about the native South Africans. He was saying, you know, they're more savage and stuff, and they need this special auditing action. So he recognized the difference between the blacks in South Africa and the whites. There was a difference, and he had to develop special auditing tech for it. And so, you know, it's ugly to talk about these things, but this is just the truth. It's just what's going on, you know. And because you're a Scientologist, don't try and. I'm just saying this to people who are Scientologists who are listening to this. Don't think that like L. Ron Hubbard didn't see the difference between the races. He was an intelligent dude. He could see that there's differences between the races. And that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's important to have these discussions, like you said. It's unfortunate that this kind of discussion is considered almost underground these days. It's almost a dirty thing to talk about. It just shows you how effective the propaganda has been, and it's been shoved down our throats since we were kids.
Can you tell me a bit about this? Especially
through TV and movies, and we won't discuss who actually controls the TV and the movies. If you know what I mean.
Well, let's just say the banking mafia, because who are the banking mafia? But if people just think and put two and two together, you know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that, I don't know, just acknowledging there's differences between ethnic groups doesn't mean that I'm calling for a Holocaust or I'm bad. It's just...
It doesn't mean you hate people because they have a different ethnicity. It doesn't mean you hate someone based on their race. But this is the way that the left tries to frame things. It's like, well, you're saying that other people are different to you, and that means you're saying that they might be inferior to you in one way, some way or another with IQ or whatever it is. That makes you a bad person, and they throw, you know, my racist and my white supremacist and my neo-Nazi and all that kind of rubbish. Even it's just nonsense. The only reaction is to just flat out dismiss it. And I actually watched a video. If you haven't seen my video, The Truth About the White Australia Policy, you should go and watch it. At the very end, I have a clip of Robert Menzies, and a journalist asked him, "Well, are you a racist?" And I said it again, Robert Menzies responds with, "Well, that's just one of these jargons, isn't it? Racist." And it's like, that's the answer. That's how you respond to it, because it's nonsense. It is just a jargon.
All right,
it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, we've got to speed things up a bit, but with the propaganda, for example, I mean, there's a propaganda in the Gillette ad, and you see in the ad, the black guy seems to always be the nice person helping someone, and the white guy is the bad guy. And unless some people can't see this sort of stuff, but it's little shifty things like that. And then you watch Hollywood movies, and they've got propaganda in them. I've watched like 4 modern ones recently, and I reckon they've got more propaganda in them than back in the 90s. Like I couldn't tell there was propaganda in the 90s, but if you go back and you watch things in the 90s, there is some propaganda, but the propaganda going on now seems much more obvious. I was amazed.
Extremely overt.
Yeah, I was amazed by how obvious the propaganda was. I was like, whoa. So if people listening to this don't know that there's propaganda in Hollywood movies, you've got to actually sit there and look for leftist agendas and know what they are, and you can see how they put in all these shifty little things. You know, like, and you're making a video about that movie, that Harry Potter movie or something like that. And that just seems like,
video,
it sounds like that. Well, listening to your review of that, it's just like, whoa, that sounds like that is just a full-blown piece of propaganda. The same as that movie, the Rwandas or something, the Black Panther movie, right?
Yep.
The sci-fi one. That was a pure piece of that was a pure piece of propaganda. That and anyway, so just wanted to say that
that's like a black creation myth fantasy. A channel that I would recommend for everyone is Vertigo Politics. If you haven't watched it yet, it's absolutely amazing. Another movie that I haven't actually seen, but I saw a really good review on it. It was a fantastic review by a YouTuber called Mark Collett, who is a British ethnic nationalist who talks about the propaganda in ads. I actually did a video about the Gillette ad where I pointed out, oh, look, the black guy's the hero. The black guy's the hero. And it's just nonsense. So that was really, really obvious. But Mark Collett does a review of the film, was it Bird Box? I think it was what it was called.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Where
Propaganda,
you're not allowed to see, where you can't look. If you look at the demon, then you die. But I haven't seen the film, so this is a second-hand account. I really need to go and look at it. It's just this review was amazing. What he actually said was, well, he pointed out that in the hero group, you know, the angry white man was the one warning them, and he was the one that was ultimately right.
So
and all the
propaganda.
And the people that can actually look at the demon, they all tend to be these MAGA kind of people, like you know, white men. The reason is the demon is actually the truth, and it's trying to tell people to hide from the truth. And the people that can see the demon are people who tend to be truth seekers, who are capable of seeing the ugly truth of nature and the fact that multiculturalism isn't going to work. So apparently, spoiler alert here if you haven't seen the film, but I haven't seen it either. Spoiler alert, just close your ears if you don't want to hear what the ending. But they end up in this multicultural heaven at the end, but it's a school for the blind and they all have to close their eyes. And the message being, if you want multiculturalism to work, you actually have to close your eyes to the truth. And you've got to watch this review by Mark Collett, and it's just absolutely amazing. It's probably one of the best reviews of a movie I've ever seen, just for that reason.
Yeah. Well, I saw that movie, and it just definitely had propaganda in it. And it was just like, this is just clearly, like they had this white man character, and of course he was mean and he picked on the women, and then in the end someone throws a pot plant on him and kills him or something, and it was just a classic thing. And also they brought up conspiracy theories, and the woman was like, to the white man was like, you just believe in stupid, you just think about stupid conspiracies and they're not true. And it was just such a piece of propaganda. But I mean, you don't realize these things until you realize what's really going on, and then you know these agendas, and then you can watch the movies and see them. But I just think that, you know, people who don't know this sort of stuff, we're not making this shit up. I mean, you've got to learn what the politics are and then go and watch the movies, and they're chock full of this bullshit. But I'm wondering, do you know what the New World Order is? Like, can you give a good explanation of that?
Yeah, actually, no. This is one of these things. I mean, in terms of the new world order, I mean, just one world government, I guess.
Yeah, it's communist. It's like a communist world government, or it's like a corporatist system, basically, where they have just all
just
globalism.
So it's globalism. It's just globalism and people pushing globalism. I mean, when people say things like New World Order and all that kind of stuff, it sort of has a picture of old men sitting in a dark room going, we're going to take over the world, which is probably not far from the truth. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I know. But I just call it's just globalism. It's people who are hell-bent on setting up a one-world government with a small financial elite at the top controlling everyone who are slaves. You know, there's no races left in the world. There's no real diversity, like actual genuine diversity of cultures and language and ideas. Everyone's just
genderless robots, literally, like with no gender, no man, no women, just this weird amalgam, and that's part of the whole gender shit. They just want to turn us into, they want to make us into trannies. Like, seriously, they want us before you go on to the next step, we talked about movies. If you want to watch a really good movie that doesn't have any propaganda, like overt propaganda that I noticed, you should go and watch Outlaw King. It's amazing. It's about Robert the Bruce. It's probably the best film I've seen in many years. It's really, really good. Anyway, move on with the next question. I was going to say something. I forgot now. You ruined it by mentioning that movie.
Sorry about that.
okay, what do you know anything good about global warming?
I just know that it's a scam. It's a globalist scam.
It's a globalist scam, yeah. Well, let's move into the Scientologists you're working with. What happened with this? Like, how long ago was it?
They were just way too controlling. It was about probably 7, 8 years ago. They were just too controlling. It wasn't really my kind of company to work for. Ultimately, I didn't like a lot of the ideas. A lot of the ideas that they were trying to push just seemed a little bit nonsense to me. Look, there wasn't. It's not like they were complete nonsense. There was an element of truth in some of the things that they were talking about, but it wasn't concise enough for my liking in terms of the Scientology that they actually showed us. And the company itself, they were quite actually manipulative in terms of the way that they got people on. They told us they were going to do. They were told us that they were going. We're going to do this for you. You're going to do that for you, and And then you get in. By the way, you have to pay for it yourself. You're like, what? You never said that before. Yeah. So no, I found them. I'd rather not talk about them too much, but I just found it a resoundingly negative experience.
There were church members in Melbourne, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because this podcast is for sires that aren't involved with the church. Because there's a little bit of there's a problem with the church. Apparently, got taken over by the government. It's a real long story. But are you willing to say what the company was?
No.
Are you willing to say what it was selling?
No.
How comes that? Is that because you still work for them or you still know them or something?
No, I don't work for them. I don't have any association with them. I don't want privacy, and I don't want to mention their name. I don't want to mention who they are.
Because I would know them.
Eh?
I would know them.
I'll tell you in person if we ever meet.
Oh,
just not on camera. No recording equipment. I'll let you know privately.
Yeah.
But it's not relevant to any of my work. It's not relevant to anything that I'm doing right now. And I want to put that part of my life completely behind me, and I don't ever think about it anymore. Ultimately, they treated me horrendously, and
really,
oh yeah, it was horrible.
That's what I want to hear about.
Hey,
that's what I want to hear about. That's interesting. I didn't realize it was so heated.
Nah, it's done. I don't care.
What was
God will treat them the way they deserve to be treated. There will be that they will receive divine justice, and that's. It's not like they were super horrible, abusive and stuff like that. They were just extremely deceptive and dishonest, and that kind of thing gets dealt with fairly quickly in the universe.
Yeah, I noticed that they. Anyway, they're sort of corrupted in that, but
yeah.
Anyway, it's totally. I mean, anyway, it's a bit. They're sort of actually stuck in the personality of the guy who took over the church. Really, they're in this hardcore and they try and oversell things, and they're like, yeah. And anyway, did you come across what were they trying to teach you about Scientology while you were working for them?
It was just part of the training program. That's all.
But what were you learning about? So did you learn Scientology admin tech?
No. It was sales. It was sales. They were teaching us to sell. I'm not going to mention what product, but yeah, they were teaching us to sell, and they were using Scientology's ideas in order to help us sell the product that we were going to be selling.
They were teaching you hard sell, were they?
Sort of.
It's a really bad thing in Scientology, the hard sell shit, because it just pisses off the customer and causes all these problems.
Oh yeah. There was all the hard. It was just a lot of the things that they did. It was just their teaching techniques. It was more the attitude of the people who were teaching. And I mean, I'm mildly on the spectrum as well. So if I think something's bullshit, then I'm going to just be like, that's bullshit. I'm at the point where I just can't. I'm not a very good liar. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at holding my tongue. If something seemed bullshit to me, then it's very difficult for me to control myself and not say that's bullshit. You're full of it.
Yeah.
I can't control myself, and unfortunately, in certain situations, it doesn't go down very well. In a lot of situations, people actually respect the honesty, but when you're dealing with people who are deceivers, it doesn't go down very well.
The funny thing is, I mean, they're like the shittest forms of Scientologists and stuff, you know, because they didn't even realize. Are you still there?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I thought it cut out. Yeah, they didn't even realize that the head church was changing the Scientology materials and that it got taken over by like this evil leader and stuff. Like they couldn't even work these things out. But also they've gotten so involved with it. I don't think they want to work these things out because they're in a little clique group of people, and they're fairly tight knit group. The Melbourne one, that is, like they're fairly hardcore. And I've noticed that I just noticed that in general with Melbourne people is they're fairly hardcore, especially compared to Sydney people. They're more relaxed in Sydney, but Melbourne people are like, they have a belief and they're like, yeah, and a bit more hardcore.
Yeah, well, Melbourne is a very politically charged city, in case you haven't realised.
And there's so many lefties here. Like, I mean, you see
outspoken. They're the ones who are the loudest. There's a lot of very outspoken lefties. There is actually a lot of non-leftists as well, and they're slowly waking up. But there's the loudest people are on the left in Melbourne. It's just it's gut-wrenching.
You see like a news report of New Year's Day from Sydney, and it's like Australia Day celebrating Australia. For Australia Day. And it's like Australia Day celebrating Australia Day. And there were some people protesting, saying it's Invasion Day, and you see some people walking. Then you see Melbourne, it's like, riots in Melbourne! It's like, man gets hung, blah, 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 and you see these crowds, all these screaming lefties, and it's like, anti-Australia Day protesters, and you're like, whoa, what the hell's going on in Melbourne? You know?
Yeah, it's... For whatever reason, the brain virus has got Melbourne. But the good side of that is it's also creating the biggest reaction to the leftist brain virus. There's probably more nationalists in Melbourne than anywhere else in the country, more outspoken nationalists. I mean, think about it. I live here, XYZ's based here, the Unshackled's based here, Blair Cottrell and Neil Erickson are both here. There's just so many nationalist activists in Melbourne. Jordan Peterson got 5,000 people the other day. I'm about to release a review of that, and it was a good talk. But he said that it was the biggest crowd that he's had on the entire tour, and it's by a long way, like by twice as many. That just tells you that people in Melbourne are craving an alternative narrative.
Yeah. Well, I did want to talk more about Scientology, but if you don't want to talk much about it, then I don't know what more there is to ask. But
I don't know much about Scientology. I had a brief experience with them a number of years ago. It was negative, and I've moved on.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it makes sense because I noticed that some of them would get into businesses that involve selling, and then they would learn this bad idea of hard sell, and then they would just like force things down people's throats and make them buy stuff, because that's how the leader of the church runs it. The church, like it forces its members to buy stuff and oversells them, and it doesn't think about what the person should actually get. It's just like sell them as much as you can. And there's this Greek guy in Melbourne who got in trouble for that because he had some insurance company or something, and he was just overselling insurance things and hard selling them, and then he now is in trouble with these like ASICs or something, and he's in trouble with the government because he was just pissing too many people off and overselling them. And I also found out a little bit more about this guy. His name's Tony something, but apparently he was running a scam in the early 90s where he was selling something and they were signing up fake names. So it was some sort of insurance thing, and they'd found people who were deceased and they signed up fake names and they got money from it. And so anyway.
Charming stuff.
Yeah, that's all I got to say. But yeah, I mean, the church members, they're not the best Scientologists. All the best Scientologists are outside the church fighting the church because it got taken over by the New World Order pretty much, you know, and anyway.
If you care about it that much, you should just actually set up your own church.
Yeah, that's what people are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, good. That's the way to do it.
I've been a bit involved with people from Sydney because they might set up their own place in Sydney because they've got enough people who can do it, because you need like a group of people. But in Melbourne, there isn't many, sadly. But Sydney would be the place. But anyway, I don't know if there's anything else I want to ask you, except maybe like how can people find your videos and stuff?
I just go to YouTube and search for Matty's Modern Life. If you're putting this one on YouTube, I'm sure you can find that and give them a link in the description.
Yeah, I'll do that.
You can find me on Gab and Minds as well. If you want to find me on Gab and Minds, it's much simpler. Just go to Matty's Modern Life on YouTube, and all my social media is linked in every single video. And you can also go to Matty Rose Live, which is my live stream channel. We do a live stream every Monday, starting at roughly 9:15.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. And I think it's good. I think I don't know, it got a bit messy though, but I think it just needs to be brought up. You know what I mean? I mean, people don't know that they've been lied to. I mean, in the 50s, people knew. They knew that the darker races didn't have as higher IQ. And I'm not picking on them. I don't care about them. They're nice and shit. You know, I like them, you know.
What people need to do is, if they're really interested, go and watch my video, The Truth About the White Australia Policy. I'll cover all of it, and you'll see exactly why Australia was set up and all that kind of thing. Plenty of material in the internet regarding the truth about white racial consciousness and ethnic identity and how it's been subverted. Check out channels like Vertigo Politics, Red Ice TV, Red Elephants. James Allsup's a decent one. The videos I've seen of his haven't been off tap, but Vertigo Politics is probably the number one with that regards. Even Stephen Molyneux's actually being pretty based, red-pilled on race these days.
Yeah, he just
don't be afraid of these conversations. People, because of the propaganda, people have been so brainwashed into thinking, no, we can't hear this, we can't talk about it. But honestly, there's nothing wrong with it. Just the only thing bad is when people start telling lies and start saying that you should dislike someone because of their genetic heritage, because of the way they were born. You shouldn't hate people because of the way they were born. Hate people for their behaviour, or dislike people or judge people based on their behaviour and the choices that they make in their life. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't advocate for a white supermajority ethno-state, because that's what's actually ultimately best for us and for everyone else in the world, because it will really mean that we can thrive and we can export our ideas overseas, and your nations can thrive at the same time as well, and they're not losing all their best people. And there's just so many reasons to advocate for our own ethnic state with a white supermajority. It's really important for our own survival, our own culture, but it's also, like I said, really good for the rest of the world, because it keeps people separate when they need to be, and we can interact and trade when we also need to.
Yeah, and you just have to look at the stats. I mean, things were better in the 50s when it was so-called racist, even though I wouldn't say it was racist back then. I'll just say they recognised the difference between the races, and people just kept separate.
People had ethnic in-group preference, and that's
perfectly
exactly natural.
And things were much better.
We spend more time with people who are like us. Birds of a feather flock together. It's like Muhammad Ali said, the bluebirds go with the bluebirds, the redbirds go with the redbirds. This is nature. This is natural law.
And
it's just that we've been brainwashed into forgetting it.
Yeah, in America, and that the black people had their areas and stuff, and that was fine. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, because all the propaganda, people think that it was like all these black people were getting beaten up and getting denied entry into white areas, but it was just like, hey, there was just black areas and there was white areas. I mean, it was fine. But also, it's a bit of a taboo topic in Scientology, because Hubbard talks a lot about like the Satan, like the spirit, and he says how the spirit's boss, and he thinks that the body is silly. Like, as in, it's just like, who cares about what color the body is? It's mainly that you're a spirit that reincarnates, right? But the problem with that, and Hubbard knew about this as well, is that when the spirit goes into the body at birth, the body then changes how the spirit expresses itself. So
that's correct.
You can have I know for sure you can have a body that's been genetically changed to be very, very dumb. And I know about secret stuff like underground bases at where the government actually cloning people. And of course, they're genetically cloning people and making them dumb as like a worker race. And aliens have been doing this for ages, and that's where there's stories about abductions and stuff, because you can change the body and make the body into a dumb body or a smart one or a good one or an evil one. And so there are different body types here on Earth, and they get changed. The spirit gets changed when they go into that body. Do you know what I mean? So we can't just ignore the body and say the body's not important because the spirit's everything, but it's just like, no, that body can really affect the spirit.
Well, your spirit expresses itself through the body. We're a vessel for the spirit, and it comes out like the idea that our genetic makeup is going to have zero effect on our spirit is rubbish.
Yeah.
Because our spirit is still affected by the choices that we make, and a lot of the choices we make are based on our genetic makeup. So you can still know the difference between good and bad and all that kind of stuff. But the idea that you can just dismiss the body when God created our bodies as well, don't forget that. He created us in his image in terms of consciousness, but he also created the universe, and our bodies are part of the universe. God created everything. So the idea that you can just dismiss part of God's creation just because, I don't like it, I mean, that's just absolute rubbish.
Yeah, and I think that you can do lots of spiritual advancements and rise above the body and stop, for example, having sexual desires and stuff like that, or even desires for food. You can do that spiritual route, which I think Hubbard is advocating, and I agree with that. But you can't deny that when that spirit goes into the body, if that's one of these bodies that are dumber with lower IQs, that person's going to have problems learning, and they're not going to have great results in IQ tests and all this sort of stuff. And there are some body types that are more likely to be criminal. We cannot deny that. It's an absolute fact. I think it's maybe because they don't have as much empathy in those body types. But I don't think it's a bunch of bad spirits going into a certain body type. I think it's just that any spirit goes into that sort of body, but that body, for whatever reason, they're more likely to do a carjacking. And you have to face that fact. It's fucking true.
Actually, it's getting late, so I'll probably have to.
We'll end it. Yeah.
But one of the things that Western civilization did was it hung 1% of its troublemakers every year for hundreds of years. So if you think about that, like if you hang 1% of your troublemakers every year for hundreds of years, that ends up being you end up getting rid of a lot of troublemaker DNA, which is again why white people are so much more empathy than other races, and it's why we're subverted so easy. Like
we get taken over,
and the outside influence has been able to subvert us by playing on our empathy. It's actually pure evil. The people who are foisting this on us and pushing the anti-white propaganda and telling us that it's not okay to have these kind of discussions are purely the work of the devil. It's pure evil.
I believe
it's important to have these discussions as openly as we possibly can, because that is the best way to fight against it.
Yeah, and I believe in this devil stuff. I believe there's a force that's outside this dimension that we can't see that's influencing certain people and making them evil, because people like George Soros and that, there's some force going on that we just can't see influencing them all the same.
And getting back to what I sort of briefly mentioned before, it's actually on a sub-collective consciousness level as well. So it's on a probably maybe in a sub-dimensional level, and it's infecting people. It's infecting people subconsciously as a group. So it's a group collection effect. I actually think that, like I said, because I think that we're all ultimately part of the same universe, which explains a lot of things like telepathy, which actually does exist, but we can talk about that another time if you want to talk about telepathy. But all these people are infected by ultimately the same thing, and that is deception. They're all fundamentally in the dishonest, deceptive realm. Whether you want to call that a dimension or an alternate reality or whatever it is, they are living a lie. They are in lies, and that's why what they create is always going to turn to evil, no matter what.
Exactly. Is there anything you would like to say or ask before I end this interview?
God loves us all. He does.
All right, good.
Just remember that.
Yeah. That question there, that's something you ask when you finish off like a Scientology spiritual session. So that's why it's kind of funny, because it's like, anything you want to say or ask before. Anyway, good answer. Thanks for being on the show, Matty.
No worries. Have a good day.
I'll see you later. Bye.
All right, so that was the interview with Matty Rose. I hope you liked it. I'll put a link to his YouTube channel in the comments section. What do I have to do now? What do I have to do now? You know what happens when it gets towards the end, or gets at the end. It's something to do with ending. That's it. I'm going to end off, but before I end off, I'm going to end off with an LRH quote. And this one is gold. I think I got this out of the Data Evaluators course. Or, no, actually, I think I got it out of the APIS magazine, the Association of Professional Independent Scientologists. It was just from an article where he's talking about stuff, and it's just one sentence that he pops in while he's talking about all this other stuff, and I just had to pull that sentence out because it's so true. And I'm going to say it. And you lefties are not going to like it, and you skeptical people and you guys who froth at the system and love the system are going to hate this, because I'm going to have a dig at those mainstream scientists and the corrupt, disgusting system and the science that they call science and isn't even science. All right, here's the quote. Ready? It's by LRH, and this is written in, guess maybe 70s or 60s or something. It says this. It says, now, science originally meant truth, and now it means research revenue. LRH. He just hit the nail on the head big time with that one. It's just so true. That's what I notice. When you look into things and you investigate further, you find out the people who are doing science are really just doing research revenue and are running businesses and keeping the research revenue going. They don't care about finding the truth, working out exactly how it works, or coming up with a cure. They just want to keep on researching, and getting the government money for grants and all that sort of stuff. And it's just a business. You got to understand that. When you go to a lawyer or whatever, or you go to a psychologist or whatever, they're running little businesses. They're no different to the man on the streets of Bangkok that's selling a $2 T-shirt going, $2, buy, $2 T-shirt, buy, come on, buy, and trying to do shifty things to make you buy the T-shirt. These things are the same. They just look much more fancier. I'm a research scientist, I'm doing a psychological evaluation, or I'm handling that court case. Yes, there are some court cases who really do need a lawyer, and it's like a proper service. But a lot of the time, it's just some Bangkok dude trying to oversell you on a T-shirt. Like, serious. Like, because the ethics level is low in this modern society. And so a lot of the time with the scientists, it's just some scientist is just trying to make it look like they're doing some fancy stuff so that they keep on getting research revenue. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, we found the answer, and then suddenly, oh, that means that we close down the research institute because you found out. So they work out how to make things complex and seem fancy to people outside it so they can keep on getting research revenue. What I'm trying to say is that global warming's a business, baby. That's what it is. It's literally a business. The people involved in it want to keep it going so that they can have excuse to analyze things and keep on checking the temperatures here and keep on going there and blah, blah, blah. And it's a business. And so L. Ron Hubbard says now science originally meant truth. And it was amongst the Greeks and stuff, and now it means research revenue. That's really what it means. And when you look into this further, you find out that they've got cures for heaps of things and stuff. They're just not releasing them. And I remember hearing a story once, and I think it was from someone who was involved with the UFO stuff, like one of these old timers, not a Scientologist, but like from that generation was around in the 50s and 60s. And he was a smart guy, and he got to work in some science labs and stuff, and I guess work on anti-gravity or something. But he mentioned how he went to work for some people, and they were doing something maybe to do with photography, and they were taking photos and calculating things or something, some science, some research revenue thingy. And he worked out a better way of doing it. Like, he basically solved the problem. And he was new to the job, and the boss, he went and spoke to the boss, and the boss said, hey, I'm impressed that you discovered this so early. But we already know this. And so, we've got a good thing going on here, and so you better shut up and not talk about what you discovered. And so this dude had solved their problem, had invented it, but whoever was running it, I guess, was making money off doing this research revenue project, and just wanted them to keep on looking for some way to photograph something and just keep it going, and then they just make a business of it. And that's how it is. That's what's going on. It's like, I'm not saying all scientific research out there is just some scientists trying to make revenue, but a lot of the time it is. And there's just a fair bit of fake work going on and sort of scams going on, more than what you'd think. And they try and make science out, especially at these mainstream universities, as like some sort of noble, special, honourable profession. And it's just like, a lot of the time it's just people wanting to keep their research revenue going. And anyway, that's it. I ended it off with a quote. It's time for you to climb back out of this rabbit hole, out of this interesting Scientology world. Thanks for listening. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You have been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. And remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.